I'm Amy Findlay. Welcome to the 24th annual celebration of the Alfred Fagan Awards. As always, I'm honoured to be here with you today as the chair of the judges of the award. The board and committee of the Alfred Fagan Award are grateful as ever to the Peggy Ramsey Foundation and to the National Theatre for their continued support of the awards. 2020 has been, and continues to be, a year of challenges. The theatre industry has long been highlighted as an industry of great importance for the economy and the enrichment of each and every one of us. But the ongoing pandemic has pulled sharply into focus the chronic issues that persist throughout our vibrant industry and the unacceptable number of individuals who've had their careers and their lives deeply affected by this crisis. The Black community has, as you may know, been unequally impacted by this year's events, and the continuing issues of inequality across the sector highlight even more so the need to create real opportunities to achieve an equitable society. This award reminds us that it is our responsibility to celebrate talent and share our message with the industry that we cannot afford to lose the incredible, rich talent that the Black community provides for the enrichment of us all. In the face of these persistent challenges, the Black community has proven that we continue to be a resilient force. We've seen conversations about the impact of systemic racism on Black communities enter the mainstream, the Black Lives Matter movement becoming a much needed but overdue topic of conversation in households, as well as the hashtag #BAMEOver campaign covered by The Independent, and organisations beginning to prioritise the concerns we've been highlighting for many, many years, admitting that the Black experience must not be reduced to tokenism or a fleeting trend, that we are a community, the global majority, human beings, and that our lives and life chances matter as much as every other person on the planet. That our hopes and dreams matter, our education, our economic opportunity, our freedom, and our peace. The plays entered this year tackled a number of issues that feel particularly relevant to us in this moment. We saw an almost 100% increase in the number of plays submitted, 50% by writers we've not previously engaged with, from all across the UK. We received plays that explore the current situation we live in, the pandemic, police brutality, the repercussions of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade on today's society, financially, psychologically and physically. Intergenerational stories of community, the mundanity of life, the complexities of giving birth in a world that, at times, favours hostility over compassion, the uphill battle for climate sustainability, and the existential dangers of living in a post-pandemic, environmentally unsustainable climate. For all of these entries and stories, we're thrilled to have seen so many writers taking on big questions, historical, social and personal, writing epic and intricate stories, and most importantly, adding to the canon of Black British plays and the documentation of our experiences. The contributions this year were absolutely incredible, and I'm delighted that we, after 24 years of this award, are able to share with you another winning play that so powerfully draws into focus the importance of telling these stories authentically. On behalf of the trustees and judges of the Alfred Fagan Award, I thank you for joining us today. I thank the National Theatre for their incredible and unending support in hosting us, the Peggy Ramsey Foundation for ensuring the continued success of the award, and above all, I thank the writers who put forward their plays. The Roland Rees Bursary is the gift of the trustees of the Alfred Fagan Award and is given to enable a playwright to devote more time to their writing. Past recipients have included Mark Norfolk, Portia Newland and Beverly Andrews. We're so thrilled to be able to offer this award, and it continues to be a moment for us to consider the challenges that sustaining a career in the industry can present. The individual receiving the award this year is a particular inspiration for us. An individual who's persisted in contributing to the cultural landscape of the UK, not just as a writer, but in a myriad of ways. He's an actor, a writer and a musician, a recent acting graduate of the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and recipient of a BAFTA scholarship. His writing credits include Asata Taught Me, his debut play, which received its world premiere at the Gate Theatre in 2017, and he is the inaugural recipient of the Bush Theatre's Passing the Baton Commission. I'm sure you will join me in congratulating 2020's recipient of the Roland Rees Bursary, Kulunji Sibandeke. Congratulations, Kulunji.
Thank you very much, Mimi. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It feels amazing to be able to say that I am the recipient of the Roland Rees Bursary of the year 2020. A really, really strange year, but actually it's ended with this incredible news that's come in the form of this bursary that will enable me to move forward into 2021 a little bit more optimistic, knowing that I can focus on my writing without the major financial burden that being a freelancer writer brings. I want to say, firstly, a big thank you to Roland Rees, the late great Roland Rees's widow, Sheila Keelan, who was the first person to give me this incredible news. I want to say thank you so much, Sheila, for your encouragement and your support to writers like myself. And it feels amazing and incredible to join this long and very illustrious list of Roland Rees bursary recipients. It feels so good that I can hardly even say the word. But I also want to say a big thank you to my family, in particular, my mum, who's been very encouraging and supportive of my writing. I want to say big thank you to my other family, my siblings, my brothers and sisters, all of whom are very encouraging and are there to support us whenever we do our work. And I know they will be hopefully inspired to know that their older brother has become a Roland Rees bursary recipient. And if they're not, I know where they live. I also want to say a big thank you to Michael Bufong from Talawa, who is actually the first director to give me an opportunity to be able to stage my rehearsed reading of my debut play, My Darling Wife. I say debut play because it's the first play that I ever wrote. And in the year 2013, Michael sent me an incredible email that shocked me really. And he said that he wanted to include my play, My Darling Wife, in his inaugural season of Talawa Firsts. It was an incredible feeling, and to have actors like Ashley Zangaja and Adelayo Dedayo read my writing was just an immense feeling. And then to have Daniel Bailey, the great Daniel Bailey, direct them was even better. So I want to extend another thank you to the Adrian Pagan Award, who too were early first-time supporters of my work, who also gave me an opportunity to be able to hold a stage reading. I'm stuttering because I'm just over the moon, and I'm just shocked and surprised to have been selected for this, because this bursary, the Roland Rees Bursary, has got so many past recipients in the form of Kosha Newland. We've had Lorna French. We've had, and just last year, we had Juliet Gilks Romero. And to be the next recipient of this award is just, I don't know what to say. I don't want to kind of continue waffling on. But what I do want to say is thank you so much to the Alfred Fagan Award Board for accepting me as the recipient of the Roland Rees Award. So thank you very much. And hopefully this is the next step into my writing career.
The Alfred Fagan Award exists to recognise the brilliant talent from Black British playwrights of Caribbean and African descent. The shortlist of 2020 Incredibly gripping stories, beautifully written and boldly born into the canon of Black British plays, continues to demonstrate that the talent and skill of the Black community is abundant and that we are brilliant. That we may continue to offer this award is to be able to champion the Black British experience and share with the theatre community and wider society that these stories do need and deserve to be told. Opportunities for Black British writers to be commissioned, their work to be given a platform and an audience, is a demonstration of a commitment to rebuilding an equitable, truthful society that we can all be proud to be a part of. We congratulate all of these writers for creating these incredible works. The shortlist for the Alfred Fagan Award for the Best New Play of the Year 2020 is Babi Bakilwa, Blackbird Hour, Emma Dennis Edwards, Bricks, Clint Dyer and Roy Williams, Death of England, Delroy, Juliet Gilkes Romero, The Whip, J.C. Nyala, Unsettled, and Daniel Ward, The Canary and the Crow. The winner of the Alfred Fagan Award for Best New Play of the Year 2020 is Juliet Gilkes Romero. Congratulations, Juliet.
Of art, the civil rights activist and singing icon Nina Simone said, "You can't help it. An artist's duty is to reflect the times." The Whip attempts to do just that. It illustrates that our view of history continues to evolve and that buried truths are placed in their correct and challenging context. This is why I am so honoured to win this prize. Alfred Fagan was seeking a new kind of freedom, artistic freedom, to reflect the times in which he lived, but most of all, to be heard and taken seriously as a talented Black British writer. So I am first and foremost grateful to my parents, Joyce and John, for encouraging me to seek my own artistic freedom. I am indebted to the Royal Shakespeare Company and the creative team and the actors who so beautifully brought the Whip to such unforgettable life. There are so many people to thank and too many to name here, but we have become a truly wonderful family, and I'm deeply grateful for that. But I'd like to take this opportunity to thank one particular person who was there from the very beginning and who saw the potential of the Whip, and that's the RSC's literary manager, Pippa Hill. Pippa read my embryonic, one-page political document, embraced my vision, embraced my fire, and immediately commissioned it for the RSC Swan stage, giving me an opportunity and a platform to tell the untold story of Britain's slave-owning past. Thank you. I am honoured that the Alfred Fagan judges have decided to award me this most prestigious Best Play prize, and during such an unimaginable year, this wild ride of 2020. And although Alfred Fagan's life was cut so prematurely short, I will always strive and continue to uphold his powerful legacy. Thank you.
So congratulations, Juliet, on winning the award. Us at Alfred Fagan are really excited to be, giving this award to you. And a little bit different this year, as you know, we're kind of having this one-to-one chat to find out a little bit more really about your process, about yourself as a writer. And so I'm just going to get straight into it, if that's okay. So first question, how did you get into writing?
I actually took a sabbatical from my work in news and current affairs, and I went to do an MA in writing for performance at Goldsmiths College. I had been kind of writing, by myself and keeping a diary because I've worked as a foreign affairs reporter and, been privileged actually to travel to some very interesting countries like Brazil, Haiti, Cuba, Ethiopia. And, I wanted to kind of formalise my interest because I was just kind of like writing by myself. And actually doing the MA was the best thing I could have done because, number one, I was introduced to the world of theatre. I thought I knew about theatre. I'd never heard of August Wilson before I'd done the MA. I'd never heard of Sarah Kane. It's just extraordinary. I thought I was well read. And I learned an awful lot from doing the MA and being with other students and sharing. I learned to share my work. I learned to have the courage to share my work. That's the hardest part for a writer. So the MA was a real opener, and also you get to work and with directors and workshop your ideas and seeing actors perform them for the very first time. It's kind of a mind-blowing experience, actually.
Fantastic. And I mean, yes, you mentioned the sort of your journey with journalism as well. And one of the things we really wondered was how it's helped you as a playwright.
I think it helped me enormously in the sense that as a journalist, you really have to learn to listen. And, it's not about the correspondent or the reporter. So if you find yourself in a refugee camp in Ethiopia, or you are, speaking to women who have been the victim of violence in conflict, as I experienced in Haiti, you've got to be able to put people at ease and just hear them and absorb their beings, their stories, and that teaches you an awful lot about character. And what I found is that actually, storytelling is very much embedded in journalism as it is in theatre. One is more immediate because obviously after the kind of editing process and then it goes out in a news bulletin, that's a completely different thing, and people can walk away from that experience if they're not comfortable. But with the theatre, it's a real crucible where you share that space with people that you don't know, but you've all come to examine and perhaps enjoy, subject matter that you wouldn't necessarily know about. And I think that the journalism, it helped me not have preconceived ideas about what I wanted to hear, because you will ask a question and the response might not be what you're expecting. And if you don't listen, you're going to miss the response and then the follow-up. So I kind of apply that to my writing and my research, and then try to bring, really, strong characters to a theatrical stage and in, TV as well.
Yeah, amazing. So, I mean, that kind of segues very nicely for us into our next question, which is what inspired you to write The Whip? And did you approach the RSC or did they approach you?
So I've always had a kind of burning desire to write about the transatlantic slave trade, which was the forced migration, abduction of a race of people. I mean, it was the basis of the world economy. It was the seeds of globalization as we know it. But, I'd seen, obviously Roots and 12 Years a Slave, and I like to be able to get an untold angle into my work. I'm very interested in politically inconvenient truths, and at the time I couldn't really find a way in, and I was invited to a day of provocation by the RSC, which was my introduction to them. The literary manager, Pippa Hill, invited me to this day with other writers, and it was hosted by Mark Ravenhill and Erica Wyman, and we discussed really taboo subjects. Should we be bombing Syria? Do people really care about images of of dead refugee children washing up on shores in Greece. We talked about sexual taboos. I was very interested in the morality of debt because of what was happening in Greece at the time, and the bailout of Greece, but the tax burden that had been placed on the people, where for some they couldn't even afford to bury their own dead or get cancer treatment. This is really serious, and it then led me back to the idea of how much is a man worth, and I thought, well, I could start researching the bailout, because the more I read about economy, world economy and bailout, I came across the story of how the slave owners were bailed out of their obligation and ownership of slaves, and it was the only way to do it, to offer vast quantities of money. And what I discovered was a story that has barely been told. We have the traditional narrative of how emancipation was conferred upon, willing victims in a sense, and the agency of slave rebellions and slave activism and black abolitionists was completely stripped out of that narrative. But what I found was that the government had borrowed 40% of its national budget to pay off the slave owners, which at the time was 20 billion, and in today's terms, that's about 20 billion. And we finished paying for this. Anybody who was working up until 2015, their hard-earned, salary went into paying off this loan. And it's like, this isn't taught in schools. How is this not known? HMRC had put out a tweet in 2018, congratulating people on helping to end the slave trade. But it caused a backlash, and the tweet was deleted, which is the worst thing to do these days. I mean, by that time, screenshots had been taken and it ended up in the newspapers. The historian David Olusogun wrote about it. And, it is, I think, how comes this isn't in the public domain? And what else don't we know about? So I was able to apply for the Freedom of Information Act to confirm these figures. And the hard research that I did, the dry research, was going to the House of Commons Library, reading Hansard from literally 1832 to 1833, reading select Foreign Affairs Committee reports about how to manage emancipation, and discovering all of these incredible conversations about, if we free these people, will they have the sense to handle money? Will they be able to handle freedom? And the fact that, black slaves are being compared to the Scottish peasantry. Extraordinary stuff I was uncovering. And then you have to have, as a writer and as a dramatist, you have to have the confidence to really just throw that over your shoulder, know that you've channeled this information, and then create characters that really sing off the page. So it was quite a process.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. It's sort of one of those questions that always kind of swirls around in our minds when we're thinking about this, is just how long did it take to kind of get this play? Because it's such an epic play. How long did it take to write? How many drafts did you have to go through? And one of the questions as well we've been thinking about is, was it necessary to have a dramaturg attached to the project, or actually was it, something that there was so much kind of information once you sort of were looking into the research and the Freedom of Information Act and all of that? Did you find that you had what you needed to be able to start dreaming up these characters?
Well, so after the Day of Provocation, Pippa Hill had challenged us to come up with plays for the RSC's studio space, the other place as it's known, and I wrote my pitch, having really kind of processed, hadn't done all of my research at the time. It was a one-page pitch, and I remember Pippa saying, you and I both know that this is not going to fit into the other place, the studio place. This is a big play, and I'm going to commission you straight away for the Swan. Which, that kind of opportunity, and also being able to work with someone who recognises the challenge of what I was wanting to conjure, and being willing to take that journey with me. So having someone commission it, believe in it, and working alongside me as a dramaturg actually was really important because I had so much material. And it's wonderful to work with someone who's not afraid of the rubble of your imagination. So I really go to town on research, and I threw it all on the table, and then I had to come up with a structure, and people would read various drafts. So I was originally commissioned towards the end of 2016. I think I had my first draft literally a year later, so about December 2017. The tweet came out in 2018, and I remember thinking, goodness, I wonder if other writers have seen this. I've got to get a move on. This really, it lit a flame under, what I was trying to do, but also really confirmed the story and the drive to get this untold story into a public domain. But it really, Pippa and I would meet and chat about my approach, my characters, and I guess at the end of the day, I probably wrote about 7 drafts. About that.
It's a lot of hard work.
Yes, absolutely.
So these are epic plays. What do you feel about writers putting only 1 or 2 writers on the stage? Was this a consideration for you, being able to write these stories about, constraining yourself, being constrained by, as you say, the sort of the commissioners, the people that really kind of hold the keys to the Swan and to the main spaces?
I think my journey is actually I've learned to have confidence in what I want to say and write, and it is a matter of finding those partners who believe in your vision. So when I pitched this idea, I didn't worry. I just thought either they're going to like it or they're not. Either they're going to see the potential of it, and the potential of it was recognised straight away. But those relationships aren't always easy to find, because to put on a historical drama of this nature and give it the space that it deserves. I mean, I think some theatres might have gone for it, and some others might have been a little bit uncomfortable with the subject matter even, and that's why I'm really gratified that it was given the commission that it was. And I remember almost being, I went to see a play in the Swan. It was Queen Anne, which I thought was brilliant, and being slightly intimidated by the enormity of the job ahead. And because black writers, we often get kind of confined to studio spaces, and I like drama with bite, political bite, and I want to write for big spaces. So, when I, got the Swan, I mean, that was a fantastic opportunity. And then I had to forget about it, and just write the play that I wanted to do. And Pippa always said, throughout, write the play that you want. So I was never confined or particularly constrained. And I often write, the size of the cast, or if timelines are crisscrossing or whatever, I leave that to the creative team to worry about. It is about getting my vision down.
And so, of all the plays that you've written so far, because you have written a few, we're really keen to know which one your favourite is. Are we allowed to ask that question? Because I know as well they're all your babies, and they're all your kind of incredible sort of works. But do you have a favourite of those?
I think, hand on heart, I could say it was a play that I've written, which has not been produced actually, called Raising Cain, and that was very much about, what happens when we make change in society, the kind of stakes of revolution, and who wins, who loses, how do we effect social justice, racial justice. And it was set during the Cuban Revolution of 1933. And I really love. I spent a lot of time in Cuba, and I just feel that it's a story that deserves to be heard. I think it's an untold story in itself. But very much interested in social change, how it's affected, and what the consequences are for those who need to fight for this. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? And whose stories ultimately get told? And as a journalist, then, I kind of really want to dig under the surface of that and find those drivers, because these are the things that drive us. I mean, we only have to look at today, and we're seeing assaults on democracy itself. It's like, who wins and who loses in situations like this. And I think like this year has been the turmoil, but we're going to see a lot of younger writers who are going to come through now, wanting to reflect their cultural reality, their social reality. And, I'd like to be there to support that as well. I think it's really important. That's real engagement in our creative industry, which needs all the kind of like power and energy that it can get at the moment.
Absolutely. And I mean, it is fascinating because we know that the pandemic this year has shone a light on the inequalities in our society. And sometimes people don't, want to hear about historical collective amnesia. And so, we wonder, is there a need to remind the wider society about the challenges we are facing currently? And how does being a journalist help you as a playwright to bring these stories to light?
Well, obviously, I am a news geek. I mean, I'm always looking at headlines, and even though I'm no longer in the newsroom, when there's breaking news, I'm kind of there, imagining how I'm going to be producing this live element, these segments, which correspondent we're going to be going to, which pictures are we going to be covering live, and I think that I feel the same about dramatic writing. Look at how the country has been locked down, how we've been forced to deal with this particular, socio-political reality of pandemic, and then also the other stories, the murder of George Floyd, and I say, he was killed, and the kind of like Black Lives Matter movement, which erupted again out of what happened, and how important that was, and and then this whole thing about culture wars, which is actually that's fought by quite a small, extreme minority, and people who are arguing that we don't want to know about the past, or identity is not something that we're interested in, and I disagree with that. I think that if we don't understand the past, we can't understand the present and come together. When Edward Colston's statue came down in Bristol, people watched the news in horror. Who are these people? These thugs we're seeing on TV, not understanding the context of that, and the fact that the slave history of Bristol and the statue itself had been an issue for decades. Now, in Bristol in 1831, there were major riots by working class people for the right to vote. And we read about that in history books. I think that what happened over the spring, that's social evolution. It's people, wanting the right to debate and reinvestigate the past. And as a dramatist, as a journalist, for me, that's really important. And, I would like to think that my work enables people to be able to do that. But more importantly, that it helps us to understand our current cultural reality so that we can draw together and, improve the way that the progress that we would like to see in terms of social or racial justice and the evolution of the societies we live in. And we're seeing the consequences of division in America right now. And I think that understanding the past helps us come together, cohesion, coherence, so that we can listen to each other, hear each other, and build a better society together.
Yeah, Juliet, you speak so kind of thoughtfully about all of this that, we're all dying to know what your next project is going to be.
I'm spinning a few plates, some that I can't talk about, but one I can, which I'm really pleased to share, is that I'm writing a play for the Synergy Project, looking at criminal justice and Black Lives Matter, and I've just begun researching that. getting my teeth into that. So, you know, we shall see what the fruits of that are.
Excellent. Thank you, Juliet. It's been wonderful as ever to speak with you. Congratulations again on winning the Alfred Fagan Award of 2020 for Best New Play of the Year. And yeah, lovely to see you. See you soon.
Thank you. And it's an honour to win it, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for the presentation of the 24th Alfred Fagan Award. Thank you to our supporters, the Peggy Ramsey Foundation, the Roland Rees Estate, and the National Theatre. Thank you to our judging panel, Daniel Bailey, Judy Malone, Olushola Oyeleye, Sheila Colleen, Brian Walters, and Matthew Zia, and to our readers. And a special thanks to Pauline Walker, Administrator and Creative Producer of the awards. Congratulations again to the winners, Kalunji Spandike and Juliet Giltz Romero. This has been an extraordinary year. Through the instability, the theatre community has continued to provide hope for so many, that we might emerge from this pandemic more connected to one another, with a renewed commitment to representation and the ability to look towards a brighter future is a wish and a hope that I hold. We may still be separated, but I look forward to the day we might meet again. For now, keep safe and keep well.
You are asking me to enable the government to purchase all of the West India slaves with money from the public coffers.
What I ask for is a moral victory which serves British democracy without loss of life in the colonies or here on English soil. There will be a compensation commission. You will need to gather intelligence on its rivals and those who would thwart it, infiltrate their public meetings.
I have witnessed desperate slaves, including my pregnant mother, leap into a cauldron of boiling sugar, thus depriving her owner of crop, servant, and future stock. I watched my dear sister broken on a treadmill. This contraption would be set up for all to see in the public square. 12 slaves at a time, the old, the young, forced to tread on a large wheel strapped by their wrists to an overhead bar as they struggle to keep the machine turning.
Having trouble stringing your words together?
Not at all. You are the one intoxicated on the ill-judged notion that compensation will buy the eternal gratitude of Britain's hard-pressed slaveholders, especially when the government is only offering £10 per head of slave.
Well, as you own 700, that's an easy bloodless profit of £7,000, and all at the taxpayer's expense, and without your need to break a sweat.
And for that pittance, you expect a patriot like myself to simply walk away from the treasures our foreign rivals covet.
How did you get those scars? Did you have to see a surgeon?
It happened at the mill.
How? Looks like it hurt.
How did you get that?
What?
Horatia points at Edmund's neck.
That? Those are letters. J and P? Well, they look burned on.
It's not your business.
Who did that?
Stop it.
Suit yourself.
They are the initials of the monster that owned me. His name was Captain Josiah Pettigrew. He tied me to a post and the iron was delivered red hot.
Why would he do that?
So that I could be quickly apprehended and identified whenever I ran away.
I have my reputation to uphold, as do you.
Oh, in politics, we're not always free to do as we please.
And how do we justify slaveholders getting 7 years free labour on top of millions in compensation? I cannot compromise. The cabinet's already decided. You don't even need my vote.
But I insist. It's public support that's needed now, and you are the man to deliver it.
No.
Because if you do not vote in favour, You will find yourself and your career the subject of yet more headlines, but this time of a darker and far uglier hue.
What the devil are you talking about?
Murder.